everyone, and a very good afternoon to our distinguished guests and panelists. May I invite Dr. Abid Suleri, Bilal Anwar, Syed Javed Gilani, and Mr. Sharif Al-Rafi to come and please join us on stage. My name is Aisha Khan, and I'm going to be moderating this session for you. Today we're going to talk about finance, scale, affordability, and access. There's a saying that money makes the world go round. I think nothing could be closer to the truth in this context than climate conversations, especially at the time of negotiations. Everything revolves around finance. When we talk about adaptation, when we talk about mitigation, or when we talk about the need for loss and damage and recovery, everything needs money, everything needs finance. The good news is that there is enough in the global economy to provide the finance. The bad news, however, is that the countries that have the resources and are also responsible for the emissions are not providing that finance at the speed and scale that is needed by vulnerable countries to address the challenges that they're facing as a result of climate change. Dr. Abid Suleri, I will begin the conversation with you, and I request that you please hold the mic closer to your mouth because we noticed in the previous session that acoustics were not very good. You write about the economy, and I've always told you that the way you explain things for the layperson is the best, because even someone like me who doesn't understand economics can easily understand when you talk about finance. And you had an institution that works very closely with climate change and the economy. So my question to you is, do you think that the Bretton Woods system is still fit for purpose? And if not, then how does the Bridge Down agenda propose to address the issues of climate finance, access, affordability? And in the context of Pakistan, that is facing extreme vulnerabilities, my question to you is that what does delayed finance mean for us in terms of the impact on people in the country?
Thank you very much, Aisha. The simple answer to your question, whether the system can deliver or not, is no. But then what's the alternate? And because there is no alternate, this question is just like as we keep on asking in our villages. When I asked my uncle around why did you go to that team or that dispenser who is not a qualified physician, and they tell me that in the absence of any qualified physician, what should they do? So of course IFIs, they are not fulfilling their purpose, but then we are struggling to find an alternate. And an example is the Geneva pledges which were made with Pakistan, 9 billion rupees worth of pledges that we received earlier this year. And then there was one small footprint, and that was that the money would only come if we will be in an IMF program. And because we were not in an IMF program till July, we didn't receive any money. Then there was this standby agreement. Then we started working on it, and because it was on budgetary funding, it meant that we had to prepare tangible projects in order to receive money. So out of $9 billion which was committed to a flood-hit country, we could only so far, according to my last information a few weeks ago, it was less than 900 million rupees, less than $1 million that we did receive. Now, in that context, if I can link this debate with loss and damage fund, where the world had two choices. One was to park this fund with World Bank, and the second was to keep waiting until UNFCCC has its own mechanism. Now, the idealistic person in me would say that we should have, because IMF and World Bank and ADB, they are not delivering, we should have had a dedicated Bretton Woods Institute for climate change and climate financing. But then the pragmatic person in me would say that would have a delayed loss and damage fund perhaps by another 5-6 years. So the approach that Pakistan took, that Pakistan supported the suggestion that for the first few years it can be housed with the World Bank, and but there must be some parallel work to create its own institute. We need to think of, as in Pakistan we say homegrown solution, developing countries grown solution. We know that the Bretton Woods Institute, they will not deliver on climate change vulnerabilities and climate change vulnerable countries. But then when we are encountered and asked, okay, if not World Bank and not IMF, then what else? So then we don't come up with any answer. So we need to work on our own system so that collectively, group of developing countries, and last year we saw this unity did work G77 plus China. So from G77 plus China, we may be able to float this proposal, may not be in COP29, but perhaps in COP30, where we can be able to provide a tangible alternative to this institute. I'm sorry I took slightly more time than allocated, but I hope it
No, thank you, Dr. Abid. I think that was very useful, and actually I'm going to come back to you to also ask you a separate question on the need for reform in the global financial architecture. But let me move to Bilal Anwar. Bilal, the National Disaster Risk Management Fund was set up to do exactly what its name suggests, to manage climate risks. Can you share some success stories with us to tell us the achievements that you made since the organization or the fund was put together? And also, can you shed some light on what is it doing, or what does it need to do to attract more finance, and what are the mechanisms through which it can ensure transparency, accountability, to ensure that the funds will be used for service delivery for people who ever need it the most?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aisha. Yes, you're right. And the NDRMF actually exactly did what it is saying. One can actually question the scale of it, the spread of it, and the scope of it, and the depth of it, but exactly what it did what it was supposed to do. So our role, our mandate was restricted to risk reduction, disaster risk reduction. So, but at the same time, it's such a wide, completely wide mandate. It basically puts into the right in the middle of almost everything, whatever is happening in Pakistan. So, some of the work which we've done, especially if you're talking about the success stories, we don't really call them the success stories. We basically say that it's more to contributions which we have done here and there. They have been very typical classical areas of disaster risk reduction, climate action, adaptation, mitigation, as well as in health areas and a number of other areas as well. So flood protection has been our the main kind of focus area, and very justifiably, if you know that Pakistan is a highly flood prone country, and from 2020 onwards, our 86% of entire disaster losses were related to the flood. So that basically justified our interventions and the work that we've done in the flood protection. But nevertheless, we were conscious about the other areas and other types of disasters as well, and that's how we positioned ourselves and invested our resources into those areas as well. So we've been there in almost every single sector, every single disaster-prone area and thematic areas, and then in places like Pakistan, KPK, GB, and other vulnerable areas as well. I think, but that's history, that's past, and moving forward, I think that's where the legal challenge actually lies for us. And now, what we have done is we've done a little bit of a soul searching ourselves, and we see that how NDRMF plays, how NDRMF is equipped, and how we can actually position ourselves with the emerging challenges and the emerging threats and the hazards which Pakistan is facing. Last year flood was for many people and for many communities as well as the policy makers, for the global community today, to say the least, was a awakening call for everyone. Similarly, NDRMF also actually undertook this internal exercise and this evaluation, and we see that how we can actually make more contributions. Now, we also aligning ourselves and we see that because, in a way that our mandate is very nationalistic within the territorial boundaries of Pakistan. But at the same time, we're talking about climate change and there are no boundaries when we're talking about climate change. And when we're talking about the private finance, particularly, again, we have to align ourselves with the international community, the demands and the strengths and the conditions of the international communities as well. So this is another area actually we are actually aligning ourselves in terms of our financing needs with the international demands and international emerging kind of approaches as well. As Larry Sab said that international finance, especially when we talk about the climate finance or disaster financing, we know that there are huge financing gaps. It's not sufficient, it's not easily accessible. There's a lot of discussion going around for the scalability of it and adequacy of it. How that is going to be converted into the real numbers, I think that's another kind of a real big challenge which is going to be there. But at the same time, some of the challenges which are kind of a country like Pakistan is so much plagued with it. For example, even sometimes we have the financing and we're not able to disperse those because there are no ready-made or implementable projects, or in technical jargon it's called bankable projects readily available. So that's the one particular area of NDRMF is really focusing on how to make a simple proposal, a simple concept into a project, and then that project is implementable. That project has all the bells and whistles attached to it, and it can be very easily and very kind of not really spending a lot of effort by different stakeholders and our implementing partner, and that can be converted and taken to the next stage. So these are the few of the measures which we are undertaking, and what we have done is we have taken a kind of very liberal kind of a definition interpretation of disaster risk reduction, and that has taken us into broad areas of all kind of disasters. It's going to take us a time to kind of find our orientation, but at least the direction is there now.
Thank you. I'm going to come back with that to ask you how you plan to actually expand the scope and scale of what the fund can do to help with assistance. Syed Javed Gilani sir, I'm going to come to you. You understand, therefore, better than most the need for strengthening adaptive resilience. My question to you is, what is the role of public-private partnership, and how important is it actually to involve communities to prioritize their needs so that there is financial inclusion of the communities that we serve and whose resilience we plan to strengthen?
Thank you, Madam Basha, and thank you, NDRMF, for the opportunity. I will start with a quote, we cannot stop natural disasters, but we can arm ourselves with knowledge. So, when I go back, it was a very difficult time, personally for me as well as for the whole of the community, for the Kashmir and the KP side. So the Asian earthquake 2005, in that, natural disaster, I lost 33 family members, and also, we have seen 84,000 people, lost their lives. So, but when we go into detail, the number of casualty in the area, what we have seen, the major portion goes to the school children. And what actually collapsed, is the system. But and I was seeing a number and was talking to me, there are around 60,000 children they passed away just because of the building were not constructed here or resilient, and the protocols were not followed. So one thing which we have learned and we have seen, and coming to that, when the people they were literally suffering from a trauma, then at that time I would appreciate the efforts at that time, the efforts of the civil society organization, starting from the philanthropists, from the local, also from the national organization, the international organization, and the donor organization, the institutional partners as well at that time. But the best thing I have seen where people involve the local community within the implementation. So we have seen the successful intervention where the distributions were community-led. The people, the community was the part of the distribution and the creditable one. And the second thing, I still remember, we as Muslim Hands and the many other partners, we constructed more than 6,000 transition shelters. And half of the work was done by the beneficiaries themselves. And two things. One is they were in trauma, so by doing this they came out of trauma. And the second thing, that was they participated in that one. So I would see number one, whatever we do is the local capacity. So when I was listening to Dr. Saab, when I was listening to Bilal Saab, because we always see out of the window what is going to come from the outer world for us. But we don't cap what the capacity we have at the local level in the shape of our country having 250 million people and a lot of generous people sitting inside, lot of academia having the capacity to develop a lot of innovative ideas and especially involving the local communities we work. So I would see, although we all are moving towards that, but the way forward is how we can sustain within the country and how we can coordinate, cooperate, and make sure the participation of the local people in all our interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it comes out very clearly that taking an all-of-society approach is what we need to address the challenges of climate change. Sharif and Rafael, you are the youth representative over here. You're going to be living in the future where climate change is going to have an impact directly on your life. Migration and displacement is going to be the new normal. I think these communities moving out from where they are and shifting to new locations. So what I want to ask you is that what role will climate finance and access play in making cities more resilient so that people have an alternative to move from one place and go and settle in another place where these services will be available to them? How do you see the future?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank you for extending the invitation, and it's really a pleasure to join you. I think Pakistan and Egypt used to be two close countries economically, politically, and in so many different aspects. So thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to join you. I'd like to start talking by the first point that we talked about, which is climate displacement and climate migration. And when we talk about that, and when we attach it to climate finance, I assume that's a very important point. In Africa, there is the first ever climate displacement migration that was signed and ratified last year by around 15 members, and currently the number is going to be increased. Climate displacement Kampala Declaration was the first ever to be signed and ratified, and it actually mentions that climate finance is one of the first and the most important aspects to tackle and to solve the climate displacement crisis. So when it comes to actually raising funds for tackling climate displacement, I assume there is a massively huge gap between Syria and the Syria, as all the northern countries are supposed to migrate right. So all the northern countries that have the capacities to finance, they don't actually do it in the right way. And the world used to be hit by several wars, by several crises that stopped these countries from reaching and from committing what they have committed in the past. That's first. Second, all the countries in the global south are suffering from what the countries in the global north have been doing. And so that's extremely important to reach the point of financing climate displacement, especially as the IPCC, which is the high scientific climate entity in the world, mentioned that around 50 million people are going to be displaced in the sub-Saharan African world by 2050, and more than 150 million are going to be displaced in the whole world by the year 2050, which is actually a very huge number. And so I assume that to tackle climate displacement, we have first to talk about climate finance, and actually the issue of climate displacement is the topic of my PhD, so I feel like talk about it more, but I'm going to stop here because I don't have
Thank you, thank you. I think that was a very pertinent point that you made about the link between migration, resilient cities, and finance. Dr. Abid, I'm going to come back to you. We are here at this convening, and it's a global stock take. Countries have gathered here to decide how far they've made progress on the NDCs and also what needs to be done to raise the level of ambition. Finance, again, is a very contentious issue and it's being discussed very vigorously at all the different financial forums. So we see that, right at the outset, many pledges were made, and even in the replenishment fund, generous pledges are being made. I want to hear from you what is the link between finance and means of implementation, because even if the money is available and access is made easier, how are we going to ensure that means of implementation which will provide us with technology and capacity to better utilize the funds? And how can we ensure that before this COP ends, there's some kind of greater understanding on the need for reform in the global financial architecture, and also to have some synchronization with means of implementation?
Well, thank you, Aisha. Yeah, the good news is that the COP started with some commitments for loss and damage fund. But then, when one looks at those pledges, many of those pledges they are either rebranded, they are the previously made unmet pledges which are re-announced. For example, if you remember, there was this pledge from United States to contribute $3 billion to Global Climate Fund, and out of those $3 billion, only $2 billion could come. And yesterday, when Kamala Harris, she again made a pledge for $3 billion. Of course, one can say that $1 billion is the previous one, and then the new commitment for $2 billion for which we will have to wait. But having said, these pledges, no matter how small, they are coming, and of course, they would be extremely important for global stock taking. Now, what is global stock taking? In global stock taking, we are talking of adaptation, we are talking of mitigation, and we are talking of somehow dealing with the existing carbon emissions which are already there in the planet, and all of them they require some sort of financing. I call it DAI, data, action and investment. So when we have investment, then we require data first in order to understand whether those data on investment, whether that is old investment or the new investment, and data on implementation. Second is action, and action again not only by the development partners but also the recipient country. And this is a loop: investment, action, data, and they keep on working on it until we have our next COPs. Now, this one, we particularly were sitting, this is important for us because this is the first time we are having this global stock taking, looking at our commitments and pledges and trying to come up with some sort of diagnostic. And this diagnostic will for sure will be a guide for us to take us further. Today we know that we will have to reduce our emission than what it was in 2019. So in next 11 years, by 2030, we will have to reduce our emission by 44%. If we want to contain the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is of course seems simply impossible. But again, then it can lead us to some new areas, and because this COP is being held in one of the oil-producing countries, I'm quite hopeful that UAE will come up with some sort of oil and gas initiative or some sort of climate fund of its own that would help in transition, because this transition is important. Just energy transition and just transition towards climate resilience, that is important. So far we are talking about finance, we are either talking of finance in terms of taking care of our vulnerabilities and our losses, or we are talking finance in order to improvise, innovate, and in order to adapt something which is not there. But then we also need to talk of finance for transition, the catalyst. So either we are talking of finance in the past or we are talking of finance in the future, but there is a very strong case that we also need finance for the present, so that that finance can be a catalyst for transition towards a climate smart future. And I think this is something that we should demand from developing countries for our collective wise, inclusive and this transitory phase finance. And it is being called as transit finance by civil society groups. So climate finance, loss and damage finance, and transit finance, all three, they are linked together, and it is a package that we are asking for.
Dr. Abid, making use of your presence here, I'd just like to ask another question. What is the kind of reform in the global financial architecture that you think we need? And are we looking at the possibility of walking away from this COP in some forward movement in that direction?
If not the climate change, I think the emerging geoeconomic and geopolitical realities that would compel the global financial system to change itself and evolve. We know that in 2024, in September, there would be this summit in New York, where the whole agenda of discussion is a fair global system. With this evolution of new countries and the world can be seen as unipolar when it comes to influence, it can be seen as bipolar when it comes to military might, which is China and the United States, but it is multipolar when it comes to economic systems. And we have more than one economic giants, and we know that the majority of them today, they are not part of the global financial system as proportion to their GDP or as proportion to their economic might. So there is a push from those countries, especially China, which is asking for a bigger role in World Bank, in IMF, in ADB, and then this climate change. If World Bank has to retain loss and damage fund, it would have to change its ways of working. And last year was important because the whole reason we saw Mr. Singh coming as CEO of World Bank, because the previous CEO was not giving enough attention to climate change issues. And that's why this year, with Ajay Banga as president of World Bank, now World Bank is more focused on climate change, and let's see that how far they evolve in next coming years and next coming months.
Thank you, Dr. Abid. Like I said, no one explains finance better than you do, so thank you for that. Bilal, in terms of readiness and preparedness, we have a long distance to cover. So how do you see the role of the private sector? Because we see that the role of the private sector is missing, and we also know that public finance is not going to be adequate to meet and address all the challenges. So what kind of innovative financial mechanisms do we need, and how can we incentivize that kind of partnership in Pakistan?
Thank you very much. I personally have the skill of making things easier, and you have a very special skill of asking very difficult questions. So anyway, let me try to address that. So well, you are right. Well, I mean, just to start off, I think the numbers which we are hearing in terms of climate financing gaps internationally or regionally, and we know to some extent nationally, although we haven't really put the price tag on all the actions yet in a very scientific manner. So whatever number from the DCs are, sometimes I really wonder that the work at the back end of it, which is something bad. I truly believe that the actual numbers are much bigger than that. So the need for financing is a lot more than what we actually been hearing so far. So what is it? You know, your question is the public finance, of course, is not going to be sufficient, And I think even if we combine public and private finance, it's not going to be sufficient for many countries. And even if the international private capital and private finance, we are able to bring that in, I think it's still is going to be taking a very considerably long period of time actually to come close to those kind of financing, climate finance models which are required. So what to do in a situation like this? So what kind of innovative financial instruments which can be put into place or put into practice? I think we're talking about internationally a number of experiments quite successfully have been done. I think one particular area which I personally mention quite a lot is that the public finance of course can be utilized as a leverage for mobilizing the capital financing. Now, because the capital finance is not going to come until and unless the risks which are associated mostly even for mitigation, and forget about adaptation, even for mitigation, somehow those risks are not mitigated, they are not hedged, they are not properly assessed. So, the one particular component, actually mechanism, is not one instrument, but it's a mechanism which comes to mind is de-risking. The de-risking actually includes quite a lot of a basket of instruments which can be applied depending on the nature of intervention, nature of project which you want to do. So I think that's one area, and a number of developing countries have to actually work on the capital and money markets in the private sector, and the governments have to come forward and they have to provide the de-risking instruments. They have to start implementing those de-risking instruments. Now, I think one particular area, one particular kind of concern which do come to our mind, especially when we talk about Pakistan, is the kind of history we have with the subsidies. And when we talk about the incentivization, investment incentivization, in the early period, that need to be incentivized and economically and financially incentivized. And subsidies do come into the mind as one of those instruments. We have not been extremely successful in Pakistan's history in making a very good and effective use of the subsidies. Actually, many of the subsidies, I can say with a very high degree of confidence, that most of the subsidies we have implemented, they have actually turned into aggressive subsidies and they have really helped that particular sector. And so that kind of concerns are very genuine, they are very authentic. So a smartly and a careful consideration has to be done before there. Now, the other thing is, I think one area where there's a lot of analytical and research work needed to be done is to make adaptation more incentivized, but at the same time more business-like as well. Sometimes I wonder that how come adaptation, and many of the adaptation mechanisms, the economic value for the product or the first service or the output or the return has not been really attached. We know that beautiful work has been done. It might not be a comparable example, but I think just for a food for thought, we know that our ladies and the women who does the household work, that has been actually very recently a methodology, a global methodology has been devised, and that has actually been come up with a tactical economic value in the work which they do and how it has a kind of multiplier. No, that methodology is there, and that is very, very interesting work and the kind of innovation which has been done, and the numbers are really mind-boggling. So I think with adaptation as well, and the similar kind of exercise need to be done, and which of course it will make the adaptation interventions a lot more attractive to the private capital. But I think just to sum up, respond to your question, I think in a specific case for Pakistan, de-risking is very, very important, because Pakistan as an economy, as a society, as a country, actually do have a number of risks, and it becomes very difficult to attract investment, especially into a non-conventional area of climate action. And so I think de-risking and all the mechanisms and the instruments which are part of the de-risking that need to be implemented, that need to be explored. There are several more actually, but this debate has to carry on for some time.
Shifting from global to the local now, Mr. Gilani, Can you share with us how important is it to climate code the budget to make climate financing more transparent and accountable so that we ourselves have a better idea of where we stand, how much are we spending, and how much more do we need? Can you just comment on that, please?
Thank you very much. Very focused question. So I would go with one very key recommendation, because we have to adopt the first thing, starting from the civil society, the government, the academia, and also the private sector dimension. The climate integrated program. So until and unless we can't integrate, with each and every of our intervention, what we do, even at within the daily life, we are not going to make a win-win situation. So it means, everyone have to invest at the individual level and also at the collective level. So one thing is that, so I would say, from the perspective of a developmental practitioner, that it has to be integrated, the climate, within the national budget, the fiscal budget, and also within all the other, organizations and the entities, those who are within the country. One thing is that. Secondly, and from there you can then integrate into your education system. Then you can integrate into your agriculture, which is the most important, and the water and sanitation, which is key for our, for the climate and for resilience. And one thing which we say, if we see the budget of our country, where Pakistan, can we see the head of mitigation, adaptation, or response anywhere in the budget sheet? So one thing is where we have to hit. So we have to start from ourselves, that this what we have pledged within the country, showing the the commitment, and also within the organization. So from the local building on, as a country, and then as all the organizations. So and one thing which I want to say, when you invest in adaptation and mitigation, then you are not going to invest more in response. So because when like I quoted an example of AJK, the schools, you remain part of that. Now the children, they are safe. So you are not going to face another, unfortunately you are going to face, but you are not going to lose much of the, the human beings and also the infrastructure. So there is an incentive, not spending more and more. And take the example of Pakistan. Starting of Asian earthquake 2005, 2010 floods, 11, 12, and now 22. Most of the funds we have invested within the response. So we have to come back and sit together, and no one can alone be impactful. Together, in partnership, and through making it a joint venture, and investing within, I would say, adaptation and mitigation is a fair way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Sharif, you said that you are working on out-migration, so clearly this is the subject of the focus of your study, and you also agreed that out-migration is going to be a major challenge in the future. So let's use demographic shifts to see beyond the impact on cities and include issues of governance, because it's clearly going to impact governance as well and create new challenges for us. So how do you see the role of finance in making fit-for-purpose governance systems and putting them in place to address this issue?
Well, thank you so much, Madam Aisha. I'd like to start by sharing that I have good news actually. Here in the hall we have two leaders of the major was the leader of the planning and the budgetary committee in the Egyptian Parliament, and we also have Madam Saha, who is the vice chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Madam Saha told me yesterday that the World Bank has agreed to and an initiative actually to schedule the deaths of the most vulnerable countries with climate change, which is actually a very impressive and very important news. So I'd like to thank her. She's actually in the back, so I'd like to thank her for this. Second, when it comes to actually the new challenges that we're talking about that are going to be raised by climate displacement and climate migration, I'd say that there are many. But just to mention one of them, actually countries used to tackle the issues of climate from only the national perspective. Yeah, we have COP, we have the international mechanisms, but when it comes to the most important point, I think that's the national policies. But an issue like climate displacement and climate migration, it requires to have regionalism or regional perspective to tackle it. So for example, since I'm talking about Eastern Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Rwanda, and some countries in this region, they have a line among each other to raise a certain framework for tackling climate displacement. And I think that's of a huge importance. That's very important when it comes to tackling climate displacement. Regionalism and the regional perspective is one of the main challenges that we have to talk about when we're talking about governance and we're talking about climate displacement. So I think this perspective of raising regionalism in tackling climate displacement is so important, and I think that other regions in the world, they have to go and follow the same thing. Why? Because, for example, imagine like we have some climate refugees in the border between Tanzania and Kenya. In order for them to pass, they don't only need to have the framework in Tanzania, they also need to have the acceptance from the Kenyan side, right? And so to have the regional perspective and the regional collaboration and coordination among countries in the same region, that's extremely important. And then we can start from talking about the regional perspective to the international perspective. I was in a conversation with the German Minister of Foreign Affairs and raised this point of climate displacement. They don't actually expect the world to have a certain framework for organizing and tackling climate displacement anytime soon, but they consider the issue being of a huge importance. And we have to build on this. We have to start from our regions, and we have to start from our collective coordination in our regions to go from regionalism to internationalism and globalization so that we can have the issue present in international frameworks and international spaces like COPs and the other international conferences.
Thank you very much. I think since we have a youth representative with us and he's talking about migration, I'm going to use that to wrap up this discussion and ask you, Bilal, starting from the fund. Is the fund also looking into this issue as the new crisis that's coming up, and will it be evolving to include such issues of displacement of people as well beyond doing directly climate management?
Actually, it's very much inevitable. We can't really ignore it. We can't ignore it. This is exactly, we are looking from that perspective as well, and we have actually seen some reflections of it from the last year flood as well, the kind of internal displacements it triggered, and what kind of social and other kind of issues which originated in some of the big cities within Pakistan. So we are definitely looking into that, and we are trying to include the demographic, social displacement, migration, and all these aspects as part of the disaster risk reduction implementation strategies, because when we are talking about the community-driven DRR approaches, we really cannot ignore these facts. And so that's very much the approach that NDRMF is conducting.
Abid, to you. Continuing the thread of the conversation on out-migration. Sharif also talked about looking at it through the regional lens. So what I want to ask you is, in South Asia, are we looking at out-migration through the regional lens, and how is Pakistan preparing itself for addressing this issue in a regional context?
Jyoti, see this climate change and migration, their linkage. Academics and researchers, they look at it, migration either as a resilience strategy, a tactic to strengthen your livelihood, to strengthen your capacity to cope with the shock, or as a direct result of climate change, whereby they become either victims or survivors. Now, when we look at this migration, now migration from region, I you can see there's some countries which perhaps would have to face more burden of this climate change-led migration. For example, Bangladesh would keep on receiving these refugees or these migrants from Rohingya or from Nepal. But in most of the countries, due to the peculiar nature of our relations with our neighbors in South Asia, perhaps most of the migration would be internal migration, internal displacement due to climate change. And this internal displacement at times it can erode societal fabric, whereby the host society communities and the migrants when they don't get on well. But at times it also can be a blissful thing. Now if I look at the floods of 2022, no matter Geneva pledges they didn't materialize, no matter how much the federal or provincial governments in their own capacity could do for them, you will see that most of the flood survivors now they are back at their native places and they are trying to settle down. Similarly, when Gelanisa was mentioning about this earthquake, most of the affectees and survivors, they actually went back to their native areas and they tried to establish themselves. So, in order to cope with this transitory migration burden, I think all one needs to do is to strengthen the sources of resilience at the places which got affected either due to climate change or due to any other man-made disaster, so that the communities which are getting displaced for the time being, when they go back, they can find some systems to sustain them. And that perhaps is what is required while tackling climate-led migration in our part of the world.
Mr. Gilani, I think your comments on how do we prepare host communities to absorb populations from outside without triggering societal conflict and tensions.
Of course, like Dr. mentioned, we are learning gradually. So when we see the outcome of the earthquake 2005, yes, of course, from that period we are learning that we managed at that time more chemical. Okay, but it was like 6 months for a transition period. But obviously, the people, we have a certain local cultural values. The people, they want to live where they have their own culture, values, and they connect with the family. So one thing is that, and I mentioned before, to stop this migration, we have to create the opportunity within the local areas. So if you create the education opportunities within the area, people will stay on. If you create the health facilities within the area, the people will stay on. And if you create the local business, the local market, the people will stay on. They will not go. If you see most of the migration, the people, why they migrate? Going to a better place for education, for health, and for livelihoods. So, creating a cycle where you can provide them with this better, opportunities, and of course sensitize each and every one that we have to go with this strategy. And we are, I think, with regards to flood, Dr. mentioned, we are quite successful in this because the people, because where we managed, the emergency and early recovery, most of the people, they went back to their native villages. And now the people, they are start constructing houses for them. Like we are constructing, many other organizations are constructing. But one thing which we ensure that the land is on the name of that gentleman. If you ensure that, then the people, they are not going to lose that interest, lost that interest there. And one thing more, and you have to create a market-based where they feel they are, they will grow. And one thing more, where we all, help the local market to grow. Not centralized, it must be decentralized. So helping the local people growing with the economy and the livelihood. creating a structure.
Thank you very much. I think before I wrap up this session, I'd just like to pose one question, and I want each panelist to take just 1 minute to respond to that. What is your concept of a fair future for all with access, affordability, and scale in climate finance? I'll start with you, Bilal.
Wow, that's a big question. You just,
You only have 1 minute.
yeah. Well, I think fair, of course, I think before the fair, adequacy is the one thing. And I think the developed nations have to come up with the fair amount of funding which is required by the developing countries. But I think they also have a moral obligation over there to provide the technology, the technical assistance, as well as the capacity building needs. So it's a lot more than just the funding, just the tangible money. It's a technical assistance, technology transfer. It's now the information technology and AI which are taking their way to it as well. So I think this is my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Abid.
Mr. Asha, for centuries there was a perfect balance on this planet, be it was food cycle and carbon cycle. And then due to human interventions, human interferences, those balances started getting disturbed. My idea of a fair future, which is climate resilient, where we have enough climate financing, that whoever has disturbed how much part of these cycles should be willing and should actually pay for doing this damage control and course correction. And that is, I think, what we are calling just transition and just climate justice. So the nature requires a balance, and we need to bring that balance in order if we really want our future generations to exist on this planet.
Thank you. Mr. Gilano.
I would say one earth, one family, one future. So Dr. Sab rightly mentioned those who are basically earned a lot, they have to pay back. And the second thing is I would see a huge scope of faith. Not Islam, but each and every faith can play a very vital role in educating the people, because half of every religion is basically cleanliness and environment. So we can pitch a lot if we can utilize the faith within the right paradigm structure.
Sharif, the last word with you, your vision of a fair future.
Maybe I'll take my answer in three consecutive points. First, we need a concrete and clear international framework that instructs global north countries not only to reach but to commit to the climate finance first. Second, we need an efficient and effective international body that knows how to get this money and how to transfer the money to countries in the global south and to the stakeholders that need it. And third, we need to have capacity building, I'd say, body or entity for those global south countries and for the stakeholders in order to let them know how to spend the money that they are going to get. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, panelists, for your wonderful and insightful comments. I think they do deserve a round of applause. And I will now request Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination to please come on stage and wrap up the session. And after that, we will have a group photograph. Secretary Sir.
Thank you very much. I wasn't part of the discussion, but I would thank the panelists and participants here on behalf of the Climate Change. When you talk of climate resilience building, the biggest stumbling block is finances, and that is the top of the town. But to be honest, it is apparently very difficult to bridge this gap. And countries like Pakistan, which I said in the morning also, We need to grow economically. We can't let our people be. But then we are looking towards hand-holding for attaining that economic growth without compromising our climate standards and with decarbonization of the sector. So I thank you all. This was the last panel discussion at the pavilion today. So I think it's wiser to just stop here. So thank you.
Below 2019 levels at the end of this decade. That will need to be followed by a rapid decline to net zero emissions in the middle of this decade. So we really have a big challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important target of cultural consumption. And the end is
Thank you.